What's up everyone, welcome back. In this video we're going to be looking at how we can add email support to our application. We've so far built our application to have very many features, but there are some that are not implemented but may be very important. Those include password resets as well as account verification. If you're not new to this course, you will probably realize that we went ahead and also created our auth model. But that auth model has that is verified field that has a default of false, therefore marking all accounts that we've so far created as not verified. So we're going to look at how we achieve the verification via email. We're also going to be looking at password resets and how we can be able to do them by simply getting the user's email and then sending them an email for the password reset link. Now, before we start, let me go back to our middleware right here. Our middleware has this add middleware, and then we added the trust or the trusted host middleware. So the trusted host middleware is one that has allowed hosts, but then I remember that I left this as an empty list. So I went ahead and just set up localhost and then the IP address of localhost to be the default domains that we can access our application from. Now that we have that out of the way, let us look at how we can set up our application so that we can be able to send emails. To start, we're going to begin by first of all importing the FastAPI-Mail object, but before we do that, let's go ahead and create a separate module in which all the functionality for sending emails is going to be. So inside our source folder, I'm going to go ahead and create a new module. Now that module is going to be similar to this that we have. I'll just create it at the root of our project, and I'm going to call that mail.py. So inside mail.py is where we're going to have the code that's going to be responsible for sending emails. So to begin, we shall say from FastAPI-Mail, we shall go ahead and import the FastMail class. And once we've been able to import it, then we shall go ahead and create our mail object. So this mail object, or the FastAPI-Mail object, is one that's going to be responsible for sending the messages, or basically this is where we're going to access methods that will help us to send emails. So we shall go ahead and say that this is going to be a FastMail instance, and once we've created it as a FastMail instance, the only argument that we have to provide in here is going to be the config object. So the config object is going to be a set of configurations that are necessary for us to be able to send emails, and that's going to be a type of the connection config class. So to begin, or to create the config object, we shall go ahead and import the connection config class, and then before we actually go ahead to create our mail object, we shall go ahead and create an object called config, which shall be an object of the config or the connection config class. Now inside here we have a bunch of items just like you see right here. So what I'm going to do is to just simply copy what we have here, and then I'll paste it inside our config object. Now some of these are going to be read from environment variables, therefore I'm going to go ahead and move them there. So I'll head over to our settings or our config.py. This is actually cause, but we also set up settings. So I'm going to head over to config, and inside config, I'm going to go ahead and paste our environment variables. Now remember that some of these are going to be read from our .env. So I have my details already copied somewhere, and I'm going to show them to you. So I'm going to search for them in my home folder. I actually call the file mail settings. And this mail settings is where I basically kept the credentials I'm going to be using. Now for this case, I'm going to be using Google's SMTP server to send emails, and I'm going to show you how you may be able to get your app password. So to start, we're going to go ahead and update our .env to include the variables that I've copied from where I had kept them. So I'm going to go to my .env within my project, and then I'll go ahead and add the following. So we have the mail username, which is going to be the name of the user, but this should also be the same as the one here. So I'm going to go ahead and modify it. So our mail username should be the same as the one we have on our email address. And then we shall have the mail password. So this is going to be an app password. Now by the time I'm recording this, I've already deleted this, and therefore you'll not be able to use this. So do not copy it. It's better you go ahead and get yours. So to get an app password, all you need to do is to go to your Google account and then simply go to where you get app passwords. So when you go to your Google account, you can go to Google support, and then under Google support, you'll be able to acquire an app password that you'll be able to use in your app as a password. So when you enter your password, then you'll be redirected to the part where you create an app password, and then that app password will be a 16-character string, just like you see right here, and that's what you'll be using as your mail password. Now I'm using this, but please do not copy this, because by the time of uploading the video, I've already deleted it. So I'm going to also leave links to how you can get your app passwords in the description. So the next thing is going to be the SMTP server, or the server that's going to help us to send emails. Now I'm choosing smtp.google.com, but you can feel free to choose the SMTP server that you may want. I've also chosen the default port, which is going to be 587, and that's the port on which we're going to be listening. So we have who is going to send the email, so that's going to be the mail from email, which is going to be this email address that I have right here, and the mail from name is going to be the name of the person who is sending that email. Now in this case, this can be changed to anything. We can even have it being the name of our application, so I can go ahead and rename this to Bookly. Now once I've set this up, this can be set up to what you want. Then I'll have to go ahead and include their types right in here. So our mail username is going to be a string, and therefore I'm going to go ahead and update this. So we shall have a string, and then we shall also have our mail password being a string. Now remember, these are going to be read from our .env. We're also going to have our mail from, so mail from in this case is going to be a string. Now I need to make sure that these are the same way, like the same keys are in our .env, so that they are read in a very organized way, so that what is called mail from email is mail from email even when we read it from our .env. So in this case, this is going to be mail from, and then we have to go ahead and simply fix that. So mail from email is going to be this, but I think this is mail from, so I'm going to go ahead and update this to mail from. And then we shall have mail from, and then mail from name, which is going to be the name of the person who is sending the email, or the company that's sending the email. Now that's going to be a string. Now our port in this case will be an integer, and to have the integer as read from our .env, we're going to have our mail server. This will be a string, so I'm going to go ahead and set it up. And then we are going to have our mail from name, which in our case is going to be a string. So I'll just come and say mail from name is going to be a string. Now these are going to be booleans, and they'll have default values, so I feel free to leave them with the default values. But one thing I'm going to do is to go ahead and specify their types. So I'm just going to say that all these are going to be booleans. Now after writing this, then we have basically set up the configurations that we need for us to be able to go ahead and use these from our application. Now once I have this, then I can go to our mail.py, and instead of having this hard-coded values, I can then go ahead and use the values that are being read from our configuration. So to do that, I'll say from source.config, we are going to go ahead and import our config object. Now remember that this is an object that is from our settings class, and to help us to access each of the variables we've described right here. So to do that, we are going to go ahead and first access our mail username. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this. So to access our mail username, we shall say config.mail username, and then I'll do the same for the others. So once this has been done, the next thing we're going to do is to go ahead and provide this config object as an argument to our first mail object. So to do that, we're going to go ahead and say that our mail is going to be a FastAPI-Mail instance, but this is going to be taking in our config. So our config is going to be the config object that we've created. So shall say config is going to be equal to config, or we can even rename this to mail config to avoid confusion. So we can say that our mail config is going to be our mail config, since we have a lot of configs. So I'll just say mail config. Now, once this is set up, we can send an email by simply going ahead and accessing the send mail function or the send message function or method, but this is going to be a coroutine, therefore we'll have to call it within an asynchronous function. So this is going to take in the message schema. So the message schema is going to be sort of like a structure in which an email is going to be, that's going to describe the email addresses we want to send to, the message body, if there are any attachments that we want to send, all that will be included in the message schema. Now, to simplify our lives, what we're going to do is to go ahead and also set up some stuff so that we can be able to send templates within our folder. If we were to check the config object, we have the template folder set right here, and this is going to be leading to a directory path, or basically a path on our system if we are to send HTML templates as our emails. So we can go ahead and also add that here. We can just come right here and say template folder, and this basically takes in a path object. So for us to use path objects, or to use paths on our system as objects, then we shall make use of pathlib. So I'm going to go ahead and import it. I'll say from pathlib, we shall import the path class. So the path class is going to help us to create objects or files, and then we shall be able to get things like the parent folders and their location and stuff like that. So the first thing we shall do is to create the base folder, or the folder of our root project. So to do that, we shall basically create a base star variable, and this base star variable is going to be as a result of creating a path object. Now this path object is going to take in the file from which we want to find the path. For our case, we want to go ahead and provide our file, which is basically this current file that we are in. And once we are being able to get the object, then we can call the resolve method, and with that we can be able to get the absolute path and then access things such as the parent folder and stuff like that. So to get the parent folder of this specific file we are in, we shall just say dot parent, and this will give us access to the parent folder of this file, which is mail.py. So we shall be inside our root project folder. So what we want to do is to go ahead and specify a template folder, and that template folder has to be just inside our source folder. So to do that, we shall just come right here and say path. So this path object is going to be taking in the first path. So this is going to be our base directory, which is the absolute path to, or the path of the parent, which is going to be our source folder. And then we need to just direct it to a folder called template. So we shall go ahead and also create this. Once we've created that, then the next thing is going to be for us to add that folder so that it doesn't miss. Shall just come and say that our templates folder is going to be present within our source folder. Now we currently don't have any templates, and we're going to be looking into how to send HTML emails. We can even keep it simple by not sending HTML templates, but just in case we want to send HTML templates, then we need to go ahead and provide the template folder. So what I'll do is to go ahead and now set up our message schema, or the structure in which we want to send our emails. So I'm going to go ahead and create a function right here, and this is going to be the create message function. So the create message function is going to take in basically the information that's required for us to send messages. I'm going to go ahead and pass it for now. And the first thing I have to do is to import the message schema class, because that's what is going to determine the structure of our emails. So I'll go ahead and import it by saying from FastMail, or FastAPI-Mail, we're going to access the message schema class. Once we have that, then a message is going to be simply an object of that specific class. So shall just come and say that our message schema is going to take in, first of all, the recipients of the messages. So here we are going to basically provide the recipients. So the recipients is going to be a list of recipients. Now that's the first argument I'm going to provide here. So our recipients is going to be a list. So I have to make use of the list type, and this is going to be a list of string objects. So another thing we shall have is going to be attachments, if we have any, then the subject. So for our subject, we're going to actually provide the subject. So let me go ahead and also say that our recipients is going to be equal to recipients. Let me actually make this plural so that we have recipients, and then we can also have our subject, and we can also go ahead. So our subject is going to be a string. Then we can basically also have the body, which is going to be the entire body or the message that we want to send with our email. So for our case, we shall have our body. Our body shall also be a string. Now, once we have that, then we have to go ahead and provide those as arguments to our message schema. So I'll go right here and say that our subject is going to be equal to our subject. So here we shall say that our subject is going to be equal to our subject, and our body is going to be equal to our body. Now we can also go ahead and specify that the types of emails we're going to send are going to be in the form of HTML. So by specifying this, then we have to also make use of another class called the message type class. So once that is done, I'll just simply come right here and specify that our subtype is going to be the HTML type. So we're going to be sending HTML emails. Once we've been able to create a message, then what we need to do is to just simply go ahead and return our message. And that is just enough for us to create a message. So with all this set up, let us go ahead and now look at how we're going to send a simple email. So I'm going to start by going to our auth routes or our auth API endpoints. And within our auth API endpoints, we're going to create a simple route or a simple API endpoint that's going to be sending an email to a random email that exists. So to do that, we shall go way before we actually do all this stuff of refreshing tokens and all that stuff. I'm actually just going to do it right here. So I'm going to start by creating a simple route. So I'm going to say that this is going to be at auth router. So for our case, we're going to make this a post request, and this is going to be send email, or let's say send mail. So this is going to be a post request, and therefore we need to define this route handler as one for sending a mail. Now this will need a list of email addresses, and these email addresses are going to be recipients. So we can say that these are going to be emails, and we need to, of course, create a pedantic model that's going to allow us to get these emails. Now, for now, what I'm going to do is to just call this our email schema or our email model. So let me just call it the email model. And I'm going to pass this for now. So let's go ahead and create the email model. We shall head over to schemas.py inside our auth. And then here we shall go ahead and create a pedantic model, and this pedantic model is going to be called the email schema. So this is going to inherit from base model, and then we are now going to go, sorry for this, so shall go ahead and then create a list of addresses. So we can call this email addresses, or let's say emails, and this will be a list of strings. So once this is done, now we have one job, which is to go ahead and import it right here. We've actually called it email schema, but it's email model. So let me just go ahead and adjust this to email model. And when we do that, then we have to go ahead and import it just right where we import our user model. So shall just come right here and say import our email model. Once the email model has been imported, now let's go ahead and access the emails. So to access our emails are of course going to be from emails. Now there's a problem right here. So I may choose to call this, let's say, emails, and then I'll go ahead and change our schema so that instead of emails, we actually have, let's say, addresses. So once that is done, we shall go back to our routes, and then we shall access our email addresses as emails.addresses. And once we have that, then we also need to go ahead and access this function for creating a message. So for now, we don't have any message that we're going to be creating. Rather, we're going to be creating our message and then we shall send that message. So I'll go back to our route right here, and all I have to do is to go ahead and import that create message function and our mail object, because that's what we're going to use to send emails. So I'll say from source dot mail, we are going to go ahead and import the mail object, and we're also going to go ahead and also import the create message function. So once we have that, then we are simply going to first of all create the HTML message we want to send. So our HTML is going to be something like, let's say, an H1, and that HTML is going to have a simple message. So we can just say welcome to the app. And then once we've been able to do that, now we can create our message. So our message is going to be a result of calling the create message function, and this is going to take in the recipients. Now remember, our recipients are going to be the emails that we've got from our email model or our email schema. So these are going to be emails, and then we shall provide the subject. So our subject right here is going to be the subject. So let's just say welcome is going to be our subject, and then the message or the body is going to be our HTML that we've created right here. So I want to go ahead and send this HTML as our email, so that's what they will be able to view in the email body. So once that is done, now let's go ahead and finally use our mail object to send the message. For us to do that, we shall just go ahead and use await, because that is a coroutine. So we shall say await mail dot send message, and then this will go ahead and take in the message that we want to send. So for our case, we shall just go ahead and provide the message. Once this is done, now we want to go ahead and also tell users that the message has been sent successfully by returning a JSON response. So we shall say return, and for our case, let's go ahead and return a plain message, or simply an object that can be serialized by FastAPI. So for our case, we shall say email sent successfully. And that will be enough for us to send our email. So once everything is working, our server is not actually running. So we have to go ahead and run it with FastAPI, dev, and then source. So we now see that we have a pedantic user error and a non-annotated attribute was detected. So this is going to be addresses, which is going to be a typing list of string. Let's go ahead and fix that. Within our schemas, we created addresses, and this is supposed to be a type. So that's a mistake I made. So if I fix that and we try running our server again, then we shall notice that our server is running. So let's go ahead and test this out. So right here in RESTFox, the first thing I'm going to do is to go ahead and simply create a new endpoint in our auth folder right here that's going to be responsible for sending an email. I'll say new request, and then I'll call this one to send a simple email. Once that is done, I'm going to clear up some of these things. So I'm going to close some requests we have here. And now we shall be good to go to send our email. So remember that our email endpoint is being found on the auth router, and therefore we need to access it via the auth prefix. So we shall go to localhost 8000/API/version1/auth, and then that's where we shall get to access the path where we shall send an email. Remember that this is a post request, therefore we have to specify that it's a post request. Now head over back here. Our route is called send mail, therefore that's what I'm going to go ahead and set. And then when you try to make a post request, of course we're missing the body. We need to provide our JSON, and our JSON has to have a key of addresses. Now this addresses key is going to have a value which is going to be a list. So in here we need to provide our list. So I'll provide the same email that's provided as one that's going to send the email. So once this is done, I'm going to go ahead and send. And now we notice that there's this delay in sending the email. So this delay is maybe due to so it seems like we have an error right here, and this error is saying that an exception was raised due to our settings. So it seems like we need to check our credentials or email service configuration. So we need to go back to where we wrote our email service configurations. Now I'm going to go back to our .env. It seems like we set up something to be wrong. So if we try to maybe say smtp.gmail.com, and then this will be able to help us. So what I'm going to do is to go ahead and restart our server by saving a random file. Our server is going to restart. If we try to send an email again, so for our case, we see that our email has been sent successfully. Now to confirm if our email has been sent, I'm going to log in into my email, and then we check the email that has been sent. So if I go to gmail.com, I'll now see that my email has been sent, and it's saying welcome to the app, just like you see right here. So for now, we've successfully been able to send our first email. Now that we've figured out how to send emails with FastAPI-Mail, let us go ahead and look at email verification. So in an application where we're making our users sign up with their emails and passwords, it becomes important for us to verify if the emails they have provided are correct. So email verification is a very important step, as it helps us to verify if the user is an actual person. Therefore, if their email address is valid, then we shall be able to successfully send them an email. On the other hand, it helps us to basically prevent things like fraud, because you can know the user who created that specific account. Now, for our case, we're going to first of all figure out a way to move data, or to move data in between our app and third-party apps using our email sending. So for our case, we are going to make use of the It's Dangerous package, which is basically one that allows us to safely transfer data from one place to another safely. So it does this in a way that it helps us to cryptographically sign our data and hand over to whoever may want to handle it, and then we get it back, but this time we just check if the data has been tampered with or not. So what we're going to be doing is, whenever a user creates an account, we're going to be sending them a verification link, and in that verification link will be a token. That token will contain data about the user. So whenever we get that token back, we shall be able to decode it, and then that's where we shall get the user account that's responsible for that specific verification. So for now, what we're going to do is to go back to our code. If you open up our database, we're going to notice that most of the accounts are not yet verified. So what I'm going to do is to go and open up SQL Electron. If you're not familiar, this is just basically a tool that allows us to view our PostgreSQL in a very simple user interface. So I'm going to connect to our database right here, and if we go to our public schema and then we go to where we have our users table, we shall notice that most user accounts are not verified. So to do this, we are going to first of all set up It's Dangerous so that we can go ahead to make use of it. So if you've not installed it, the first thing we shall do is to go ahead and pip install. So this can be ppnv install or Peritry add, whatever you use. I'm just keeping it simple by using pip. So I'll say pip install, and for my case, I'm going to basically say I'm going to be using the It's Dangerous package. And this will go ahead and add it to our virtual environment. And once that is done, the next thing is to go ahead and set it up. Now remember, in our previous videos that we created the utils file or utils module, in which the utilities for doing things such as password hashing, creating access tokens are found. So I'll head over to that file, which is going to be found in utils.py inside our auth directory. I'm going to close some of the stuff that we have right here. And what we're going to do at first is to first of all set up It's Dangerous module so that we can create this token that's going to be URL safe, or one that we can basically send through our URLs. So to do that, I'm going to come right here, and what I'm going to do is to first of all go ahead and import a class And this class is what is going to help us to sign the data that we're going to present within our tokens. So I'll just come right here and say from It's Dangerous, we are going to go ahead and import our URL safe timed serializer. Now the URL safe timed serializer is one that's going to help us to take in a string and then create a token into it, but this time we can also be able to set the time that we can be able to check the time after which this token has been able to, or this data has been signed. So for example, if we created a token and we wanted to check if it has been signed and been passed around for this amount of time, we can be able to do that using this URL safe timed serializer. I'll leave the link down in the description. So once we've done that, I'm going to come right here, and the first thing I'm going to do is to create a function. So this function is going to be one called the create URL safe token. So this is going to take in the data that we want to sign, or the token, or let me just call it the data. So this will be our dictionary. For now, what we're going to be doing is to go ahead and sign the token. So for us to be able to create a token, we need to first of all create an instance of the class that we've imported, which is our URL safe timed serializer. So we need to just come right here, and the first thing we shall do is to create a serializer object. So this serializer object is going to be an instance of our URL safe timed serializer, and it's going to first of all take in the key, which is going to be the secret key that's going to use to sign our data. Now for our case, we already have one set up, so we can just come right here and say secret key is going to be config. So we already have our config object, and from that we already set up a secret key. So I'm just going to keep it to the same as our JWT secret. Now you can be able to generate that, but from the previous videos, remember that we use the secrets Python module to generate this secret key. And once we've been able to do that, we can also go ahead and provide the salt, and we can name this anything we want, but for our case we shall just name it email configuration. So once we've created this serializer, now we need to go ahead and use it to sign the data that we've sent within this function. So for us to be able to achieve that, we're simply going to come and say that our token is going to be equal to serializer. So this can have multiple methods, but for now we can call the .dumps method, and the .dumps method is one that's going to allow us to get a value and then serialize it into an object, or basically a string that is going to be sort of like a token, just like a JWT we created, and that is what we're going to pass into the URLs that shall be used to verify the user accounts. So for our case, we're going to go ahead and provide the object, which is going to be our object right here, which is our data. And once we've been able to do that, now this is going to take in only the object as well as the salt. So we can also go ahead and provide the salt right here. So our salt can also be equal to our email verification. So this right here is our serializer, just like we've created it, and this is our dumps method that's going to allow us to basically create the token. So for us to make use of this token, we shall simply return it just like you see right here. So we shall say return token. Once we've been able to do that, then we shall create another function that's going to be responsible for getting our token and then decoding it to get the data that's stored within that token. So for our case, we're going to come right here, and we shall create that function and call it decode URL safe token, and this will take in our token. Now this token is going to be a string, and for our case we are going to use a try except block, so because we can encounter errors when this data has been tampered with, when it has a bad signature and stuff like that. So for our case, what we're going to do is to go ahead and use our serializer. Now one thing I did was to create this serializer in here, but what I can do is to just come right here and simply remove it and create it outside our function, so that we can access it in these different functions. Now what I'm going to do is to also go ahead and change this name, so we can call this, let's say, our token serializer or something of the sort, but I think it's the only serializer object that we have within this file. So I'm going to keep it to serializer. Once we have that, then we can go ahead and decode the token by simply saying that our result or our data or the token data is going to be equal to, so for our case we shall have the serializer, and just like we call dumps, we shall call loads. Now I think repeating myself is providing the salt right here, so I have to go ahead and remove it so that we just have it created right here. So I'll just come right here in the serializer object, and then I'll call that .loads method. Now this .loads method is going to take in the token, of course. So this is going to be the complete opposite of the dumps method, as it's going to be the one to just return the data that's decoded within our token. And once we've been able to do that, now we're going to come right here and return our token data. So once we've returned our token data, we shall accept any error. So I'm just going to come right here and say accept, and for our case we shall accept any exception as E, and then we shall just go ahead and log that exception. So for our case, I'll just say logging dot error, and then I'll just provide the string error, that specific error, and this will be just what we shall get when we encounter such an error. So here we can even return none, but I'll just simply leave it to basically where we throw the error. So once we've been able to do that, we now have an idea of how we're going to be sending tokens within our URL. So for us to do that, we shall go back to our auth routes, and within our auth routes, what we need to do is to go to where we create a user account. So where we create a user account, after the user has successfully created their account, we need them to send an email, and that email needs to have the information or instructions on how they can verify their accounts. So we're going to create some simple HTML, and that HTML is what we shall send via our email. So I'll come down here, and what I'll do is to just create the HTML message for verifying the user email. So I'm going to keep this simple, but you can as well use Ginger templates. So for our case, I'll just come right here and say that we shall have F, which is going to make this an entire F string, and then inside here is where we're going to have our HTML. So for my case, I'm going to provide an H1, and this H1 is going to be verify your email. So we're going to close this, and once we've closed this, then we can provide a paragraph. So this paragraph is the one that's going to have the instructions for verifying the email. So shall just tell them to please click this link, so to verify your email, and then we can provide the link. So I'm going to first of all close this paragraph, and then once I've been able to close that paragraph, I'm going to make a link. So this is going to be our anchor tag with an href. So we're going to provide we're going to be providing the email, or basically the link that's going to be used to verify the email inside here. So I'm going to go ahead and close this, then I'll close the anchor tag, and then I'll put our link right here. So our link, or our email verification link, is going to be one for, let's say, so for our case, we shall just come right here and say our protocol is going to be HTTP, but then you need to provide a domain on which our account has, or our application is running. So to keep it dynamic, what I'm going to do is to create an env value, and that is going to stand for that domain on which our server is running. Now there are very many ways you can get that programmatically, but I'm choosing to choose the easy way, which is we can just go ahead and provide the domain environment variable. So let's just call this our localhost. So for our case, this is going to be localhost 8000. Now we can also add the /API/what, but I'm going to just keep it to localhost 8000. So if our app is running on, let's say, bookly.com, then that's what we shall set right here, and then we can be able to access it here via our config object. So assuming that we have it, I don't think we have it in here, shall go ahead and import our config object. So we shall say from source.config, we are going to go ahead and import the config object. And once we've imported the config object, now let's go ahead and make use of it to access our domain. So for our case, we can just come right here and say config dot, so this also needs to be an f string. So then on our config object, we shall access our domain. And then on this, we need to go ahead and verify our email slash on the slash API slash version 1. And then we need to go to auth. Then we can also go where we have our email. So for our case, this is going to be slash auth slash verify. And then in here is where we're going to provide the token that we need to send with our email. So for our case, we shall just come right here and provide this link as our link. And then we shall also go ahead to provide our token. So our token is going to be created from the create URL self token method or function that we've created right here. So for us to be able to do that, we shall go ahead and import that. So we shall go from where we imported the other functions for creating our access token and verifying our access token. And then we shall import create URL self token. And then we shall also go ahead and import that's going to be one for basically decoding our URL self token. So this is what we shall use when verifying our email. So for now, we need to create our token. So we are going to create a variable right here where we are creating our user account. So we shall say that our token is going to be equal to create URL self token, and for our case, our data is going to be a dictionary, and this dictionary is going to have our email. So we need to just hide our email in here. So our email is going to be the user's email, and that's what we get right here. So we shall just provide the email value. And once we've been able to do that, now we need to just create our link as one that's going to have that specific token. Once that is done, then we are going to send this HTML message just like we did for when we are sending our email. So I'll just copy what we have here, and then we shall just go ahead and basically change our response. So at first we shall have to first send our message, which is going to be, so in here we need to get the emails, but our emails is going to be a list, and the only person we are going to be sending an email is going to be the email that we already have. So that's going to be our email. And once that is done, then we are also going to get the subject. So our subject here is going to be verify your email, and then our body is going to be the HTML message object, and that will be just enough for us to send our email. Now one thing we need to also do is to go ahead and change our response so that we can tell the user that their account has been created and that they need to go ahead and verify by checking their email. So one thing I'm going to do is to just come right here, and I'm going to customize how we are returning this. So we're going to first of all provide a message. Now our message is going to be account created. So for our case, we are also going to tell them to check their email. So we shall say check email to verify your account. So once that is done, then we're going to also provide the newly created user. So for our case, we shall just come right here and say user is going to be, so for our case, our user is going to be the new user that we've created right here. So that will also be serialized and returned to us. And that will be just enough for us to go ahead and create our user and send them an email for verification. Now to do that, let's go ahead and test this. So I'm going to head over back to RESTful right here, and the first thing I'm going to do is to head over back to where I will create a user account. Now I'm going to close some of the folders that we have here so that we can focus right here. So in here we have the endpoint for creating a user account, and we can now go ahead and test it. So I'll just begin by providing our username. So let's just call our user Jonathan, let's say 23. And now for our case, we shall go ahead and provide our email. Now let me provide an email that's valid. So for our case, we shall say gmail.com, and then our first name is going to be Jonathan, and then we can also go ahead and provide the last name, so we can say Sally. So for our case, we're going to provide a simple password, and when we send this email, so we see that our input is greater than the max length. So I'm going to go ahead and change this to let's say Jonah Sally. I guess this is actually long, so I'll just keep it to Jonah, maybe 35. So when we send this, we have an error, so we need to go ahead and fix that. And this error is coming from so setting object has no attribute domain. We forgot to add that to our settings. Now that is inside our config. I'll just go ahead and simply set that up. So our domain will be our string, and once we've set that up, our server is going to run, no problem. So let's go ahead and test it again. When we send, we already have our message of our user existing. So I'm going to change the email that we're going to send to. So let me just change the email to, let's say, Sally Jonathan k@gmail.com, and then when I send, we see that there is some delay that's happening, but if everything goes well, then we are going to send our email. So we already have our server, right? Our server error. So for now, we see that our response model has a certain structure. It expects our data, but then we cannot be able to send that data. So let's go ahead and fix that. So in a case where we are sending our data in a customized way, then we need to also go ahead and modify the response model. So for our case, we have the response model being the user model, but since we are returning this dictionary that has the data that is not in a user response format, then that shows that we already have an error, and that's what the error that we are actually getting. But let's first of all confirm if our email is being sent. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my Gmail. So that's the Gmail I've signed in with, and then we're going to confirm if our email has been sent. So if I go to Gmail, I'll go to that specific account on which I've sent an email. So I'm going to go ahead and check if an email has been sent. And now we can see that our email has been sent, just like you see right here. So we've been able to send our email, and our email has been sent. So we now see verify your email, and this is the message that we've sent in our body. We can also see the link that's being sent. So if we try to go to that link, it's going to go on localhost 8000, but then that link does not exist. Therefore, we can see that we have a detail of not found. Therefore, we've successfully been able to send that verification email. Now we're going to go ahead and simply look at how we can verify our email using our API. So at first, we need to first of all fix the error that we've had. So what I'm going to do is to go ahead and remove this response model argument so that we return our message in this way. So for example, we have this user account created, and this is the message that we're going to be sending as well as the user object. So we do not need to go ahead and specify the user response model. So now that our email has been sent, we need to go ahead and create the endpoint for verifying our emails. For now, I've gone ahead and deleted this specific account for which I've created an account. So what I'm going to do is to go ahead and show you how I've done that. So I've gone ahead to delete that account that we have used so that we go ahead and continue testing this functionality for sending the verification email. Now, before we do that, we're going to also implement the API endpoint that's going to be necessary for us to verify a user account. So to begin, I'm going to go right before the login endpoint. And what I'll do is to use our auth router to create a new API endpoint. So I'll say at authrouter.get. So this shall be on the /verify/token endpoint of path. So once we've done that, we shall describe the path handler function, which is going to be async def, and this will be our verify user accounts, and this will take in our token since we have provided it as a path parameter. And then we shall also need our session object, so we're going to provide our session. Now this is going to be got as a result of using the get session dependency. Now it seems like we don't have it here, so I'll go ahead and import it. I'll say from source.db.main we shall get our get session dependency. And once we have our get session dependency, now we're going to come right here, and all we're going to do is to inject that inside here. So we shall say this will be depending on the get session dependency. So I think I made a mistake right here. This is supposed to be a type and this is supposed to be the value. So we are going to go ahead and change that by saying this is going to be our async session, and then that will be our dependency. So once we've been able to do that, now the first thing we're going to do is to decode the token that we've got. So to decode the token, we shall say that our token data is going to be equal to decode URL self token, and then we shall provide our token. And once we've been able to get this data, now we need to get the user email. So our user email in this case is going to be equal to token data dot get. So in this case, we are going to get the email if it exists or none if it doesn't exist. So if we provide our email, then we are going to go ahead and check if the user email is not none. So we can do that by saying if user email, and then we shall use our user service object to get that specific user with that email. So to do that, we shall say that our user is going to be equal to, so our user in this case will be our user service dot get user by email, and for our case we shall provide our user email. Once we provided our user email, now we're going to go ahead and check if this user is not none. So for our case, if the user is not none, we shall go ahead and throw an exception. So we shall do something like race user not found, because now we have our custom exceptions. Once that is done, then we're going to simply go ahead and use our user service to update the user's values. So we didn't set that method up on our user service class, therefore we need to go ahead and set it up. Now what I'm going to do is to head over to service.py inside our auth, and what I'll do is to implement another method that's going to be responsible for allowing us to update the user. So I'm going to say async def, and I'll call this update user. So this is going to update a user with some data. So shall say self, and then shall create a dictionary of user data. So this data is going to come from the path handlers, and then it will also take in the session object. So this is going to be our async session. Once this is done, we're now going to go ahead and basically write the logic for helping us to update the user data. So what we're going to do is to first of all get the user. So for our case, we need to provide some specific data that we're going to use. We need to go ahead and get that user. So that means I have to go ahead and provide the email as a parameter, or be able to get that specific email or that specific user object. So to do that, we shall just come right here and basically I provide another attribute that's going to be the user email. So shall say that our email is going to be a string, or we can even get a user object. So for our case, we can just come right here and get a user object. So we can just go ahead and provide this and let it be our user object. So this user object is what we're going to be updating using the user data. And once we have that, now we can simply go ahead and update the user using our user data. So to do that, we can just come right here and say for key value, since our data is going to be a dictionary, we can just access the user data dictionary and we access all the items. And once we've accessed these items, now we're going to go ahead and update the current user or the user basing on those specific properties that we've got from our dictionary. So to do that, we can use the special set attribute function, and what that will do is to get the object, which is our user object, and then update it with a key and a value. So for our case, we shall say update with key and then value. So that means that if we have our email that we are going to update, then the value for the email on our user object is the one that is going to be updated. But for our case, what shall be updating is going to be the is verified attribute. So once we've been able to do that, we shall go ahead and basically make sure that we commit this using our session. So to do that, we shall say session dot, in our case we're going to call the commit, but remember that this is a coroutine, therefore we'll go ahead and call it with await. And once that is done, we shall go ahead and return the updated user. So we shall say return user or return none, whatever you want to do. So for our case, once we've been able to do this, then we are going to use the same method to go ahead and update the user. I'm going to go back to our routes, and what I'll do is to go ahead and simply await. So for our case, we are going to go ahead and call our user service object. And on our user service object, we shall call the update user method, and that's going to take in our user. So for now, we have our user here, which is our user object. So we shall provide that. And then we're also going to have the user data that we're going to update. For our case, that user data is going to be a dictionary, and all it's going to have is going to be that is verified attribute. Now the value for that is going to be our true, and then we are going to provide our async session object. So the async session object we're going to provide is going to be this session that we provided right here. Once that is done, now let's go ahead and return a good response. So for our case, we shall just come and say return, and we need to return a response. So we can just go ahead and return a JSON response object, and for our case we can provide the content as a successful message. So we can say that our content is going to be having a message. Now this message will be telling one that their account has been successfully verified. So we shall just say user or account verified successfully, something like that. And once that is done, then we can also set the status code to return with this response. So our status code is going to be a 200 status code. Now we shall just come right here and say this is going to be status.http 200. Okay, let me go ahead and format that. And this is basically what will happen in case our user account has been verified successfully. Now, another thing we're going to do is to handle that case in which our user email has not been verified. So to do that, we shall just come right here and basically return a response showing if our user has not been, or if our user account has not been verified. So shall just come right here and say return response, and for our case, this is going to actually be a JSON response. Now this JSON response is also going to have content, but this is going to be simply a message to show them that something went wrong. So shall just tell them that error occurred during verification. And then we shall return a status code. So for this case, our status code is going to be something like 400, or let's say a 500 internal server error or something of that sort. So shall just come and say status.http. For our case, we are going to just come and say 500. So I'm going to go ahead and save, hoping that our server is running. It is running. So now let's go ahead and repeat the step for email verification. So for now, what we've done is to create the API endpoint that's going to be responsible for verifying our tokens. It's going to get the token, decode it, get the email from that token, and then use that email to get the user account, for which we shall then update if the user is the one that has submitted the request. So to do that, we are going to get back to our RESTful right here, and I'm going to go ahead and try to create an email or an account for that specific email that we provided right here. And now we see that our account has been created successfully. We need to check our email to verify our account. So to do that, I'm going to head over back to our browser right here, and I'm going to check the email. So we now see that a verify email message has been sent. And when we try to access this, our email is going to be the one that we have right here. So we also have one here, and this one is also telling us to verify our email. So I'm going to try to click this link, and now it's going to redirect us to our browser. So we now see that something went wrong on the server side. When we check with what went wrong, we're now seeing that the user get user by email is missing the required positional argument session, which we forgot to provide. Now I need to go ahead and add that. So by getting a user email, we need to also provide the session object, which I forgot to provide. So this is going to be our session. And I think even this, for this I've provided the session, which means that we are right. And then I think that will be good to go. Now I'm going to go ahead and also get rid of that specific user so that we repeat the same step for that specific user. So when the user creates their account will be created, and then a verification email has to be sent to their account. So if we go back right to our email, we shall see that an email has been sent to verify their account. If we try to get to the link, we shall now see that still we have an error. So let's see where the error is coming from. So this is going to be a coroutine object, has no attribute, is verified. So it seems like we forgot to await something. Now I'm going to go back right here. So this is a coroutine right here, but we forgot to go ahead and call it with await. So I'll say await, and then I think I did that for the update user. I don't know why I keep forgetting this. So if we go back, I'm going to do a lot of deleting, but this is just for testing purposes. So when I remove that user, I'm going to try again to create their account. So let me close some of the links that we have right here. And I'll also get rid of that specific email. So when you try to create a user account for this user, our user account is going to be created. The email is going to be sent, just like you see right here. And when you click this link, let me close what we have here. We shall now see that our account has been verified successfully. So for us to be able to go ahead and check if this is actually done in the database end, I'm going to still be using this tool for basically helping us to visualize our database. So I head over to the user table, and now we see that is verified is true for that specific account that has the email that we've used. So by doing this, you can be able to help users basically identify themselves by providing valid emails. What happens is they sign up, an email is sent to them, and then they'll be able to get to have their emails verified. In this video, we've been able to look at how we can set up emails and implement account verification using those emails. We've looked at how we can use FastAPI-Mail, which is a package that allows us to easily send emails with FastAPI. We've also looked at how we can set up the It's Dangerous package to help us be able to send data from our application and then get it back without it being tampered. If you've enjoyed this video, please leave a like. Do not forget to subscribe if you're new. I am requesting that you click the subscribe button because you have a goal of reaching 10K this year. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one where we're going to implement the password resets.